The merchant ship Luminous Current drifted through the black emptiness of space like a small fish in an endless ocean. Inside the ship, Captain Hilo stood on the bridge and watched the stars pass by through the large viewing window. His translucent skin glowed softly under the ship's lights, and his large eyes reflected the peaceful darkness outside. Hilo belonged to the Velthran species, a race of traders and scholars who had never known war. His people were fragile by galactic standards, with thin bones and delicate bodies that could barely lift heavy objects. But they were excellent merchants and navigators, which made them valuable across the galaxy. The cargo hold was full of rare crystals from the mining colonies of Sector 7. These crystals would fetch a good price at the trading stations near the core worlds. Hilo had made this run dozens of times before. It was supposed to be safe, routine, and boring. His crew moved quietly around the bridge, checking instruments and monitoring the ship's systems. There were 12 crew members in total, all Velthran except for one Tralian engineer who kept the engines running smoothly. They were good people, honest workers who sent money back to their families on the homeworld. "Captain, we're approaching the relay beacon," announced Cirith, the young navigation officer. She was barely into her second decade of life, fresh out of the academy and eager to prove herself. "Good," Hilo said with a gentle smile. "Once we pass the beacon, we'll be in Council-protected space. Smooth sailing from there." That's when everything went wrong. The ship's alarm system screamed to life, filling the bridge with harsh red light and a piercing wail. Hilo's hearts began to race as he gripped the edge of his command console. "What's happening?" he demanded. The sensor officer's face turned pale. "Ships dropping out of hyperspace. Multiple contacts. They're Kravesh!" Terror flooded through Hilo's body. The Kravesh Dominion, slavers, raiders, killers. They were one of the most feared species in this sector, known for their cruelty and their appetite for conquest. The Galactic Council had issued warnings about them for years, but they operated in the lawless zones between territories where no one could stop them. "Evasive maneuvers," Hilo ordered, but he knew it was useless. The Luminous Current was a merchant vessel, not a warship. It had no weapons, weak shields, and engines built for efficiency rather than speed. 3 Kravesh warships materialized around them like sharks surrounding wounded prey. Each ship was twice the size of the Luminous Current, covered in dark armor plating and bristling with weapons. They were built for one purpose: to take what they wanted by force. A communication signal forced its way through the Luminous Current systems. The screen flickered and showed the face of a Kravesh commander. He was massive, with segmented armor covering his body and mandibles that clicked together as he spoke. His eyes were cold and empty of mercy. "Velthran vessel, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded," the commander said in a voice like grinding metal. "Resistance will result in immediate destruction. Compliance will result in processing. Choose quickly." Hilo felt his hands shaking. Processing. That was the word the Kravesh used for slavery. They would take his crew, put them in chains, and sell them to the highest bidder in the flesh markets of the Outer Rim. His people would spend the rest of their lives in cages, working until they died. "Sir?" Cirith looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "What do we do?" Before Hilo could answer, the Kravesh opened fire, not to destroy but to cripple. Energy beams lanced through space and struck the Luminous Current's engine section. The ship shuddered violently, throwing crew members to the floor. Sparks exploded from control panels and the lights flickered. "Engines are down," the engineer shouted over the chaos. "Life support is failing. We're dead in space." The Kravesh ships moved closer, their docking clamps extending like metal claws. Hilo watched helplessly as they latched onto his ship's hull with heavy echoing thuds. He could hear the sound of cutting torches beginning their work, slicing through the outer doors. His crew gathered around him, some crying, others frozen in shock. They all knew what came next. The Kravesh would storm through the ship, round them up like animals and drag them away. There would be no rescue. The Galactic Council never responded to distress calls in time. By the time any help arrived, they would already be gone. But then Hilo remembered something. A story he had heard in a bar years ago, told by a drunk cargo hauler who claimed to have seen things in the deep dark of space. Stories about a species that had been quarantined by the Council, locked away in their own corner of the galaxy because they were too dangerous to let loose. Humans, the Deathworlders. Most species thought they were myths, horror stories told to scare children. But the cargo hauler had sworn they were real. He said they came from a planet so violent and deadly that it should have been impossible for intelligent life to evolve there. He said humans were predators, pack hunters who never forgot a wrong and never abandoned their own. The Council had forbidden contact with them 3 generations ago. There was an old emergency frequency, one that supposedly reached their space, but it was illegal to use. The penalty for breaking the quarantine protocol was severe, but what did laws matter now? The sound of the crevasse breaching the outer hull grew louder. Hilo could hear his crew screaming as the slavers began to storm through the corridors. Weapons fire echoed through the ship. Someone nearby was begging for mercy in a language the crevasse didn't understand or care about. Hilo's fingers flew across his console, accessing the ancient communication protocols buried deep in the ship's database. He found the forbidden frequency, the one marked with warning symbols and council restrictions. His hands hesitated for just a moment, then he heard Sirith scream. Hilo activated the transmission and spoke quickly, desperately, into the microphone. "This is Captain Hilo of the merchant vessel Luminous Current. We are under attack by Kravesh slavers at coordinates 779 Alpha. They're killing my crew. They're taking survivors for the slave markets. If anyone can hear this, please. We need help. Anyone. Please." He barely finished the message before the bridge doors exploded inward. Kravesh warriors poured into the room, their weapons raised and their mandibles clicking with satisfaction. They grabbed Hilo roughly, yanking him away from his console and throwing him to the floor. The last thing he saw before they dragged him away was his console screen, still showing the transmission signal reaching out into the void of space. The message was traveling through the dark, crossing the light years, heading toward a region of space that every civilized species avoided. The message was going to Earth. Far away, in a system that most of the galaxy pretended didn't exist, alarms began to sound. The forbidden frequency had been activated. Someone had called for help from the Deathworlders, and the humans always answered. The signal reached Outpost Meridian at exactly 0347 hours, station time. The monitoring station floated in the darkness at the edge of human-controlled space, a silent guardian watching for threats that might come from the wider galaxy. Commander Jiwan was drinking her 3rd cup of coffee when the alarm sounded. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and gray streaking through her black hair, a veteran of 20 years in the Terran Defense Network. She had seen plenty of false alarms in her career, but something about this one made her spine straighten. "Report," she snapped, moving quickly to the main console. The junior officer at the communication station looked confused and worried. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission on frequency Delta 9. Jiwan felt her blood run cold. Delta 9 was the old emergency channel, the one left open when humanity had been forcibly isolated by the Galactic Council. No one had used it in 3 generations. Most species probably didn't even remember it existed. "Play it," she ordered. The bridge fell silent as Captain Hilo's desperate message filled the room. Jiwan listened to every word, her jaw tightening with each passing second. When the message ended, she didn't hesitate. "Get me Admiral Deho. Priority 1. Now." Admiral Deho was already awake when the call came through. He was always awake, it seemed. The old man ran on discipline and duty rather than sleep. His office aboard the command station was simple and spare, decorated only with a single photograph of Earth and a list of names carved into a metal plaque on the wall. Names of people who had died under his command. He listened to the recording twice, his weathered face showing no emotion. When it finished, he stood up and walked to the window overlooking the shipyards. Dozens of vessels floated in the void, warships of every class and size. "The Third Fleet, his fleet, how long ago was this message sent?" he asked. "Approximately 4 hours, sir." Jiwan's voice crackled through the speaker. "Based on the coordinates, the attack happened in the outer spiral, near the Kravesh territories." "The Kravesh," Deho repeated quietly. He knew about them. Everyone in Terran intelligence knew about the Kravesh Dominion. Slavers, butchers, the kind of species that gave the galaxy a bad name. The kind of species that humanity had been itching to deal with for decades. "Orders, sir?" Deho's eyes hardened. "Sound General Quarters. I want the Third Fleet ready to move in 30 minutes. Full battle configuration. And get me Captain Minna." "Sir, the Council protocols are about to be violated," Deho interrupted. "We received a distress call. We're responding. That's what we do. Within minutes, the entire fleet burst into activity. Ships that had been on standby roared to life, their engines igniting like small stars. Crew members ran to their stations, grabbing weapons and sealing their armor. The shipyards became a hive of organized chaos as 40 warships prepared for battle. Captain Minha arrived at the flag bridge within 10 minutes, still fastening the last seals on her uniform. She was younger than Deho, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through skill rather than politics. Her eyes were quick and calculating, always looking for angles and opportunities. "You heard the message?" Deho asked without preamble. "I did. Slavers attacked a merchant vessel. They called us for help." Mina studied the tactical display showing the coordinates. "It's 4 hours old. They could already be dead or processed." "Probably," Deho agreed. "But we're going anyway. The council will protest. Let them." Deho pulled up a holographic map of the fleet. "I want you commanding the strike force. Take the fast attack group and hit them hard. I'll bring the heavy cruisers behind you for support and extraction." Mina smiled coldly. "Rules of engagement? Anyone with weapons pointed at civilians is hostile. Anyone trying to run is hostile. Anyone wearing Krevish colors in that system is hostile." Deho met her eyes. "We're sending a message, Captain. Make it loud." Down in the lower decks, Lieutenant Sunho gathered his Marine squad for briefing. He was young for his rank, barely 25, but he had proven himself in the border skirmishes that humanity had fought quietly over the years. His squad respected him because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. "Listen up," he said, his voice carrying across the ready room. "We've got a rescue operation. Unknown number of civilians held by hostile forces. The brass wants them back alive." One of his Marines, a woman named Curie, raised her hand. "What about the hostiles?" "Dead or captured. Command doesn't care which." Sunho pulled up images of the Krevesh on the display screen. "These are Krevesh warriors. Big armored mean. They've been raiding in this sector for years. Today they picked the wrong victims." The Marines began checking their weapons and equipment. Power armor was sealed and tested. Rifles were charged and loaded. Breaching tools were distributed. Every soldier in the room knew that they might not come back, but none of them showed fear. They were human Marines. Fear was something they caused, not something they felt. In the medical bay, Dr. Heron supervised her team as they prepared for casualties. She was different from most of the crew. A civilian scientist who had joined the military to study alien species. She had advocated for peaceful contact with the galaxy, written papers on cultural exchange, and dreamed of the day when humanity could rejoin the galactic community as friends, rather than feared outsiders. But even she understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. "We don't know what species we'll be treating," she told her staff. "Prepare for everything. Different atmospheres, different biologies, different medical needs. These people have been through trauma. Be gentle." Chief Engineer Dongmin walked through the engine rooms of the dreadnought Unbroken Resolve, checking every system personally. He was old enough to be Sunho's father, with scars covering his hands and a permanent scowl on his face. He had kept these engines running through 3 wars and countless battles. He would keep them running today too. "I want maximum power to the rip drives," he growled at his team. "I don't care if we have to cannibalize secondary systems. The Admiral wants speed, we'll give him speed." The rip drive was humanity's unique contribution to faster-than-light travel. Most species used dimensional folding or wormhole generation, technologies that were safe and predictable. Humans had looked at those methods and decided they were too slow. Instead, they had developed a system that literally ripped holes in space-time and forced ships through them. It was dangerous. It was violent. It was brutally effective. At 04:15 hours, Admiral Deho stood on the flag bridge and looked out at his fleet. 40 warships hung in formation, their weapons ready and their crews eager. He thought about the message they had received, about Captain Hylo's desperate plea for help. Most species in the galaxy thought humans were monsters. Violent, unpredictable, dangerous. The Galactic Council had quarantined Earth because they feared what humanity might do if allowed to roam free among the stars, maybe. They were right to be afraid. But there was one thing the galaxy didn't understand about humans. Yes, they were predators. Yes, they came from a world so deadly that it had forged them into warriors. Yes, they were capable of terrible violence. But humans had something else too. They had empathy. They had the strange ability to care about people they had never met, to fight for causes that didn't benefit them, to risk their lives for abstract ideas like justice and mercy. Captain Hilo had called for help. Someone innocent was being hurt by someone evil. That was all humans needed to know. "All ships report ready, sir," the communication officer announced. Deho took a deep breath. Fleet-wide transmission. The channel opened, connecting him to every ship and every crew member in the Third Fleet. "This is Admiral Deho. A few hours ago, we received a distress call from a merchant vessel under attack by slavers. The victims called out to the darkness, hoping someone would hear them. We heard them. Now we're going to answer." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The galaxy thinks we're monsters. They locked us away because they're afraid of us. Today we're going to show them why they should be afraid, but we're also going to show them something else. We're going to show them that humans protect the weak. We hunt the predators. We answer when others call for help." His voice hardened to steel. "Today the Kravesh Dominion learns what it means to face Earth. No mercy for slavers. No quarter for butchers. We find every single one of them in that system and we end them. Are we clear?" 40 ships responded as one, their crews shouting their acknowledgement. Deho nodded once. "Engage rip drives. Take us to war." Space itself screamed as 40 ships tore holes in reality and vanished, racing toward a desperate merchant captain who had gambled everything on a myth. The Deathworlders were coming. Warlord Thexus stood in the command center of his flagship and watched his warriors process the latest catch. The Velthrin were weak creatures, easy to break and profitable to sell. 300 units of various species filled the holding pens of the processing station, and the luminous current had added 12 more. The processing station was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, hidden from casual scans and perfect for the Dominion's work. Thexus had operated here for 7 cycles without interference. The Galactic Council issued their meaningless warnings, but they never acted. They were too weak, too divided, too afraid. "The new stock is secured," reported his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Vrock. "The Velthrin ship is being stripped for parts. Should be finished within the day." "Good." Thexus clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. "Contact the buyers on Rel Station. Tell them we have premium stock available. Velthrin scholars always fetch high prices." Down in the holding cells, Captain Hilo pressed his face against the cold bars of his cage. Around him, his crew huddled together for comfort. Most were crying. Some were too shocked to even do that. The cell was cramped and filthy, designed to hold cargo rather than living beings. Sirith sat beside him, her young face streaked with tears. "Captain, will anyone come?" "Your message, I don't know," Hilo admitted quietly. He had used the forbidden frequency, sent his desperate plea into the darkness toward a species that might not even exist. "I sent it to the humans." An older Velthrin in the next cell laughed bitterly. "Humans? The Deathworlders? You sent a message to ghost stories?" "They're not ghosts," said a different voice. It came from a Tralian merchant who had been captured weeks ago. His fur was matted and dirty, but his eyes still held intelligence. "I met someone once who claimed to have seen a human ship. Years ago, before the quarantine. He said they were real. Said they were terrifying." "Terrifying doesn't mean helpful," the older Velthrin muttered. Hilo said nothing. He had no proof that humans existed, let alone that they would help. All he had was hope, and even that was fading. Above them, in the command center, a young Kravesh sensor operator noticed something strange on his display. "Warlord, I'm detecting unusual readings at the system's edge." Thexus barely glanced at him. "Be specific. Space-time distortions. Multiple signatures. The operator's voice faltered. "They're not using standard FTL drives. It's something different. Something violent." For the first time in hours, Thexus felt a flicker of concern. "Show me." The main display lit up with sensor data. 40 contacts, each one radiating power signatures far beyond what the Kravesh fleet could generate. They had appeared at the system's edge moments ago, and they were already accelerating inward with impossible speed. "Run an identification scan," Thexus ordered. The operator worked his console frantically. Long seconds passed. When the results came back, his face went pale. "Warlord, the computer identifies them as human vessels." The command center fell silent. "That's impossible," Vrock said slowly. "Humans are quarantined. The council? I don't care about the council, Thexus snapped. But his mind was racing. He had heard the stories, the same as everyone else. Tales of a species so dangerous that the entire galaxy had agreed to lock them away. But those were just stories. Propaganda to keep lesser species in line, weren't they? All ships to battle stations, he ordered. Defensive formation around the station. Activate all weapon systems. The Kravesh fleet consisted of 12 warships, each one a veteran of dozens of raids. They had faced pirates, corporate security forces, and even council peacekeepers. They had won every battle. But as the human fleet came closer, even Thexus could see that something was different. These ships moved with purpose and precision. There was no hesitation, no communication attempting negotiation, no warning shots. Sir, they're dividing into groups, the sensor operator reported. Tactical formations. They're moving like they've already planned this entire battle. Captain Minha stood on the bridge of the fast attack cruiser Storm's Edge and studied the tactical display. The Kravesh had arranged their ships in a standard defensive formation, protecting the asteroid station. It was a textbook defensive posture, the kind taught in every military academy. It was also completely inadequate against human tactics. Signal the attack group, she said calmly. Execute pattern theta. Hit them from 3 vectors simultaneously. I want confusion and chaos. Make them panic. Her ships peeled away from the main fleet and accelerated to attack speed. Human engines roared to life, pushing the vessels far beyond what most species considered safe velocity. But humans didn't care about safe. They cared about effective. Thexus watched the human ships approach and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty. These vessels moved too fast, changed direction too quickly. His warriors were scrambling to adjust their targeting systems, but the humans were always somewhere else by the time they fired. All ships, open fire, he roared. The Kravesh fleet unleashed a barrage of weapons fire, energy beams, and missiles streaking through space toward the human vessels. It should have been enough to cripple several ships at least. The humans simply weren't there anymore. What? Vrock started to say. Then the human fleet struck back. Minha's attack group hit the Kravesh formation from 3 directions at once, their weapons firing with devastating accuracy. Human railguns launched slugs of metal at relativistic speeds, punching through Kravesh armor like it was paper. Missile pods opened and released swarms of smart munitions that swarmed over enemy shields like angry insects. The first Kravesh warship exploded in silence, its reactor breached by a railgun strike. The second lost its entire engine section to a missile barrage. The third tried to retreat and ran directly into the line of fire from another human ship. All of this happened in less than 2 minutes. Impossible, Thexus whispered, watching his fleet burn. They're too fast. Too accurate. How? They're humans, Vrock said quietly. The stories were true. In the holding cells, the prisoners heard the distant sounds of explosions. The station shuddered and shook. Emergency alarms began to wail throughout the facility. What's happening? Sirith asked, clinging to Hilo. The Tralian merchant pressed his face against the bars, listening. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. I think someone answered your message, Captain. More explosions rocked the station. The Kravesh guards abandoned their posts, running toward the docking bays in defensive positions. Panic was spreading through the facility like wildfire. Thexus realized with cold certainty that he was going to lose this battle. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever encountered. These humans didn't just have superior technology. They had something else. They fought like predators, like creatures born to hunt and kill. Prepare my personal ship, he ordered. We're evacuating. What about the warriors? Vrock asked. What about the station? They're on their own, Thexus said coldly. Signal a general retreat. All ships that can still move should run. We'll regroup at the secondary base. But retreat was easier said than done. The human fleet had positioned themselves perfectly, cutting off escape routes and herding the Kravesh ships like prey. Captain Minha watched her tactical display with satisfaction as the enemy formation fell apart. They're trying to run, her tactical officer reported. Don't let them, Minha ordered. Any ship that breaks away from the station gets priority targeting. And someone tell Lieutenant Sunho that the station is ready for boarding. I want those prisoners out alive. Far above the chaos of the space battle, Admiral Deho watched from the bridge of unbroken resolve. His heavy cruisers had formed a protective perimeter around the combat zone. ready to provide support or cut off any enemies that slipped through Minha's net. "Status?" he asked. "5 Kravesh vessels destroyed, 4 crippled, 3 attempting to flee," the tactical officer reported. "Captain Minha is pursuing. Marine teams are launching for the boarding action." Deho nodded. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Kravesh had never faced an enemy like humanity. They had grown complacent, used to fighting species that valued their own lives too much to take risks. Humans didn't have that problem. They had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them. They had learned to strike first, strike hard, and never stop until the threat was eliminated. Lieutenant Sunho felt the boarding pod shudder as it launched from the carrier ship. Around him, his squad sat in silence, checking their weapons one final time. The pod accelerated toward the asteroid station, its armored hull designed to punch through whatever defenses it encountered. 30 seconds to impact, the pilot announced. Sunho sealed his helmet and activated his armor systems. "Remember the mission. Secure the civilians first. Neutralize hostiles second. We're not here for revenge. We're here for rescue." The pod slammed into the station's hull with tremendous force, its cutting lasers already burning through the metal. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space. Then the pod's doors blew open, and the Marines poured into the station. The Kravesh guards barely had time to react before human weapons fire cut them down. Sunho's squad moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, each Marine covering the others, advancing in perfect coordination. They had trained for this their entire lives. Lieutenant Sunho moved through the station's corridors like a ghost. His armor's sensors painted the world in multiple spectrums, showing him heat signatures and movement through walls. Behind him, his squad moved in perfect formation, covering every angle and approach. They had already encountered 3 groups of Kravesh guards. All 3 groups were now lying on the floor, either dead or unconscious. The Marines hadn't slowed down. "Contact ahead," whispered Curie, her rifle raised. 4 hostiles, standard weapons guarding a blast door. Sunho examined the tactical feed from her armor's sensors. The blast door was reinforced and sealed. Behind it, according to the station's layout they had downloaded, should be the main holding area, where the prisoners were kept. "Flashbangs first, then breach," he ordered quietly. "Non-lethal if possible. We need information about how many prisoners and what condition they're in." The squad moved into position. 2 Marines prepared breaching charges while another readied the flashbang grenades. When Sunho gave the signal, everything happened at once. The grenades flew through the air, detonating with brilliant flashes of light and deafening sound. The Kravesh guards stumbled backward, their sensitive compound eyes overwhelmed. Before they could recover, the Marines were on them, moving with brutal efficiency. Sunho's armored fist connected with a guard's head, dropping him instantly. Curie swept another's legs and pinned him to the floor. Within seconds, all 4 guards were neutralized without a single shot fired. "Secure them," Sunho ordered, "and get that door open." The breaching specialist went to work on the blast door's control panel. Human computer systems were different from most galactic technology, built on principles of redundancy and brute force calculation rather than elegance. Within 30 seconds, she had the door open. The smell hit them first. Unwashed bodies, fear and despair. The holding area was a nightmare of cramped cages stacked 3 high, filled with dozens of different species. Some prisoners pressed against the bars, hope flickering in their eyes. Others were too broken to even react. Sunho removed his helmet, wanting the prisoners to see his face. To see that he was real, that help had arrived. Several prisoners gasped or screamed at the sight of him. He knew what they saw. A human, one of the feared Deathworlders, standing in their prison. "We're here to help," he said firmly but gently. "We received your distress call. We're getting you out." For a moment, no one moved. Then a Velthran near the front pressed his face against the bars. Captain Hilo, according to the identification markers Sunho's computer had matched. "You came," Hilo whispered, tears streaming down his translucent face. "I didn't think. I hoped, but I didn't believe." "We came," Sunho confirmed. "Now let's get you all out of here." The Marines began working on the cage locks while others secured the perimeter. But the process was slow. The Kravesh had used multiple redundant locks on each cage, designed to make escape impossible. "Sir, we've got movement," one of the Marines reported. "Multiple hostiles converging on this position. They know we're here." Sunho made a quick decision. "Half the squad on the doors. Hold them off. The rest of you, get these cages open. Use plasma torches if you have to." We're not leaving without them. Outside the station, Captain Minha's battle group was finishing their work. 8 Krevesh warships were now destroyed or crippled. The remaining 4 were attempting to flee in different directions, hoping to overwhelm the human perimeter through numbers. It didn't work. Minha's ships had positioned themselves perfectly, covering every possible escape vector. The fleeing Krevesh vessels ran directly into carefully prepared kill zones. Human weapons spoke again, and 3 more enemy ships fell silent. That left only one, Warlord Thexus's personal flagship, the Bone Render, accelerating desperately toward the system's edge. He had abandoned his fleet, his warriors, and his operation, caring only about his own survival. The command ship is making a run for it, Minha's tactical officer reported. Should we pursue? Minha smiled coldly. No need. Signal the Admiral. Tell him we have a special delivery for him. Aboard the Unbroken Resolve, Admiral Deho received the message and nodded in satisfaction. His heavy cruisers had been waiting patiently in the outer system, forming a wall of steel that nothing could penetrate. Track the fleeing vessel, he ordered. I want a firing solution, but don't engage yet. Let him run. Let him think he might escape. The Bone Render raced through space, its engines pushed to maximum power. On the bridge, Thexus watched his sensor display with desperate hope. The bulk of the human fleet was behind him, still engaged with the station. Ahead was open space and freedom. Then new contacts appeared on his sensors. Massive contacts. The human heavy cruisers, including a ship that registered as a dreadnought. They had been waiting for him. Thexus's mandibles clicked rapidly in fear. Evasive maneuvers. All power to shields. But there was nowhere to go. The human ships had formed a cage around him, slowly closing in like predators toying with prey. The Bone Render tried to turn to find any gap in the formation, but the humans matched every move before he even made it. His communication system crackled to life. A human voice, cold and hard, filled his bridge. Krevesh vessel, this is Admiral Deho of the Terran Defense Fleet. Cut your engines and surrender. This is your only warning. Thexus felt rage overwhelm his fear. How dare these creatures demand his surrender? He was Warlord Thexus, terror of the outer spiral. He would not bow to anyone, especially not to some quarantined species that shouldn't even be here. All weapons fire, he screamed. The Bone Render unleashed everything it had, every weapon system firing at once toward the nearest human cruiser. Energy beams and missiles streaked through space in a desperate attack. On the bridge of Unbroken Resolve, Deho watched the incoming fire with no expression on his weathered face. Point defense, engage. Helm, bring us about. Weapons, prepare broadside. The human dreadnought's close-in weapon systems activated, filling space with streams of projectiles that intercepted and destroyed the incoming missiles. The energy beams splashed harmlessly against shields designed to withstand much worse. The Unbroken Resolve rotated ponderously, bringing its full weapons array to bear on the Krevesh flagship. The ship was enormous, twice the size of Thexus's vessel, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons that represented decades of human military development. Target locked, the weapons officer reported. Fire, Deho said quietly. The broadside was like the wrath of a storm. Dozens of railguns fired simultaneously, launching their deadly cargo at a significant fraction of light speed. Missile pods opened and released their payloads. Energy weapons added their fury to the barrage. The Bone Render simply came apart. Its shields collapsed under the first impacts, its armor evaporated, its hull shattered into thousands of pieces. Where there had been a warship, now there was only expanding debris. Thexus had just enough time to realize his mistake before the bridge section of his ship exploded. And then he was gone. Deho watched the destruction for a moment, then turned away. Log it. Any Krevesh vessels that survived are to be taken into custody. Send a message to the rest of their dominion. Slavers will find no mercy from humanity. Back at the station, Sun Ho and his squad had finally gotten the last cage open. 300 prisoners of a dozen different species stood in the holding area, free but uncertain. Many were injured, all were traumatized. Captain Hilo approached Sun Ho carefully as if afraid the human might disappear. Thank you, he said simply. I don't know how to properly express. You saved us all. Sun Ho smiled and extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. After a moment's hesitation, Hilo reached out with his own delicate hand and grasped it gently. You called for help, Sun Ho said. We answered. That's what we do, but why? asked Cirith, still clinging to Hylo's side. Why would you risk yourselves for strangers? Suno considered the question. Because it's the right thing to do. Because someone has to stand up to bullies, because... He paused, searching for the right words. Because we're human, and humans protect people who can't protect themselves. The evacuation took hours. Dr. Hyerin and her medical teams worked tirelessly, treating injuries and providing comfort. Many of the rescued prisoners had never seen a human before, and their initial fear gradually transformed into wonder and gratitude. The luminous current was too damaged to fly, but the human ships had plenty of room. The freed slaves were given medical care, food, and clean quarters. Many broke down crying at the simple kindness of it all. In the flagship's medical bay, Hylo sat on a bed while Dr. Hyerin treated his injuries. She worked with gentle efficiency, her hands steady and sure. You're very brave, she said quietly. Using that forbidden frequency. You couldn't have known if anyone would answer. I had no choice, Hylo replied. It was certain death or possible help. I chose hope, Hyerin smiled. Hope is a very human concept. Maybe more species should try it. As the fleet prepared to depart, Admiral Deho stood on his bridge and looked at the destroyed Kravesh vessels floating in space. 12 warships had attacked this sector regularly for years. Now all 12 were gone. The processing station was secured. Its workers arrested, its equipment destroyed. The Kravesh Dominion had learned an expensive lesson today. Set course for the neutral zone, Deho ordered. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 300 species filled the massive circular hall, their voices raised in anger, fear, and confusion. The session had been called as an emergency, and everyone knew why. The humans had broken the quarantine. Ambassador Talon of the Velthran Consortium stood at his speaking podium, his old body trembling slightly but his voice strong. He had served the Council for 40 years and had never seen such disorder. Order, he called out, activating his speaking amplifier. We must have order. It took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down. When it finally did, Councillor Vrax of the Kralathi Federation spoke first, his multiple eye stalks focused on Talon with clear hostility. The humans violated the quarantine protocol, Vrax said, his voice hissing through his translator. They entered galactic space without authorization. They engaged in military action against a sovereign species. They must be sanctioned immediately. A rumble of agreement rolled through the chamber. Many species had voted for the quarantine 3 generations ago specifically, because they feared what humanity might do if allowed to roam, free, but not everyone agreed. The humans responded to a distress call, argued Councillor Telman of the Sereth Union. One of our own merchant vessels sent out a plea for help. The humans answered. Would the Council have preferred they ignore it? The Council has peacekeeping forces, Vrax countered. The proper procedure would have been to notify us, not to launch a military assault. Your peacekeeping forces would have arrived in 3 days, Talon said quietly, stepping forward. By then, Captain Hylo and his crew would have been dead or sold into slavery. The humans arrived in 4 hours and saved 300 innocent lives. He pulled up a holographic display showing the battle footage. The Council members watched in silence as the human fleet systematically destroyed the Kravesh vessels. Some representatives looked horrified at the efficiency of the violence. Others looked thoughtful. This proves our point, Vrax said when the footage ended. Look at how easily they destroyed 12 warships. Imagine what they could do if they turned that power against the Council itself. Then perhaps we shouldn't give them reason to, Talon replied sharply. The humans had every opportunity to attack civilian vessels, to establish military bases, to seize territory. They did none of those things. They rescued the victims, arrested the perpetrators, and then requested permission to transfer the freed slaves to our custody. A new voice entered the discussion. Councillor Yaris of the Mordesh Collective stood, her crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. I have reviewed the human transmission to our border stations, she said. They were polite, almost apologetic. They explained their actions, provided evidence of the distress call, and offered to coordinate with our authorities. This does not match the behavior of a species seeking conquest. It could be deception, Vrax insisted. Or it could be honesty, Yaris countered. We locked the humans away based on fear, not facts. We never gave them a chance to prove themselves. Perhaps we were wrong. The chamber erupted into argument again. Some species demanded military action against humanity. Others called for investigation. A few brave voices suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was time to end the quarantine. Far from the council chamber, in the neutral zone between council space and human territory, the Third Fleet had established a temporary station. The freed prisoners were being processed and prepared for transport home. Captain Hilo stood in the observation deck of the human medical ship, watching Earth vessels move back and forth with supplies and personnel. Beside him stood Captain Minha, who had been assigned as the liaison between the fleet and the recovered civilians. "Your council is debating what to do about us," Minha said without preamble. "Some want to declare war. Others want to strengthen the quarantine. A few are suggesting we might be allowed to join the galactic community." Hilo turned to look at her. In the days since his rescue, he had learned much about humans. They were direct, sometimes brutally so. They valued efficiency and honesty over diplomatic niceties, and despite their fearsome reputation, they possessed a kindness that surprised him. "What do you want?" he asked. Minha considered the question. "Admiral Deho asked me the same thing. Personally, I think isolation made sense when we were younger as a species. We were angry about being excluded and we might have lashed out. But we've had 3 generations to mature. We're ready to be part of something bigger. But," Hilo heard the unspoken word, "but we won't compromise who we are," Minha finished. "We won't stand by and watch innocents suffer just to appease politicians. If joining the council means we have to ignore distress calls and follow procedures while people die, then we'll stay isolated and do what's right anyway." Hilo understood. Humans would rather be alone and righteous than accepted and complicit. It was a foreign concept to most galactic species, who valued stability and order above individual justice. "Ambassador Talon is proposing that you be given a provisional seat on the council," Hilo said quietly. "He's one of our best diplomats. If anyone can convince them, he can. And if he fails, then I suppose we'll meet again when someone else needs rescuing." Minha smiled at that. "You're learning to think like a human, Captain." Aboard the Unbroken Resolve, Admiral Deho received a communication from Earth's unified government. He read the message twice, then called his senior officers to the conference room. Captain Minha arrived first, followed by Lieutenant Sunho, Dr. Hiran, and Chief Engineer Dongmin. They gathered around the table, waiting for the Admiral to speak. "Earth wants our recommendation," Deho said simply. "Should humanity engage with the Galactic Council, or maintain our isolation?" "We should engage," Dr. Hiran said immediately. "Think of what we could learn, what we could share. Medical knowledge, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation. Isolation has made us strong, but engagement could make us great," Dongmin grunted. "As long as we don't let them dictate our actions. We answer distress calls. We stop slavers. We protect the weak. Those are our values, non-negotiable." "The galaxy needs us," Sunho added. "I saw it in the eyes of those prisoners. They had given up hope until we arrived. How many others are out there right now, suffering because no one will help them?" Minha nodded slowly. "The council is weak because it's afraid of conflict. They'd rather maintain peace than achieve justice. But they're not evil, just cautious. Maybe we can change that. Maybe having humans on the council will give them the courage to do what's right." Deho listened to them all, then stood and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the rescued civilians being transferred to council ships that had finally arrived. They moved slowly, carefully, still recovering from their trauma. "When I was younger," he said quietly, "I believed humanity should conquer the galaxy, prove our superiority, make everyone bow to our strength." He turned back to face his officers. "I was wrong. Our strength isn't just for conquest. It's for protection. The galaxy doesn't need us to rule them. They need us to stand between them and the darkness." He made his decision. "We'll recommend engagement, but on our terms. We join the council as equals, not supplicants. We maintain our military independence. And we make it clear, any species that preys on the weak will answer to humanity." 2 weeks later, Ambassador Talon stood before the full Galactic Council and made his final argument. He had spent days in private meetings, negotiating, compromising, and using every ounce of political skill he possessed. 300 lives, he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. That's how many souls the humans saved. Not human lives, not Velthrin lives. Lives of a dozen different species from across the galaxy. They asked for nothing in return. They took no territory, made no demands, sought no compensation. He pulled up another display, this one showing testimonials from the freed prisoners. Captain Hilo appeared, speaking directly to the council. "I sent a message to the humans not knowing if they were real or myth," Hilo's recording said. "They were real, and they were everything the galaxy needed them to be. Strong enough to defeat our enemies, compassionate enough to treat us gently, wise enough to know when to fight and when to show mercy." The recording changed to show Sirith, the young Velthran officer. "The human who rescued me was named Sunho," she said, tears in her eyes. "He could have killed all the guards. It would have been faster, easier, but he tried to spare them because he said even enemies deserve mercy when possible. That's not the action of a monster. That's the action of a hero." One by one, freed prisoners gave their testimonies. A Tralian merchant who praised Dr. Hiron's medical care, a Serath engineer who described how human technicians had repaired his damaged implants, a Kralathi child who drew pictures of Lieutenant Sunho and called him a guardian angel. When the testimonials ended, Talon faced the council directly. "We quarantined humanity because we feared them. Perhaps that fear was justified once. But today, I propose we end the quarantine not because we're no longer afraid, but because we've learned something more important. Sometimes the things we fear are exactly what we need." He transmitted his formal proposal to every podium in the chamber. "I move that humanity be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full voting rights and military independence.